This is 13 Minutes. I'm Elliot Reeves. My guest today is Scott Riley. Scott, it's brilliant to have you here. How are you, my man?
Yeah, doing great. Thanks, Elliot. Really appreciate the invitation on for a chat. And yeah, been looking forward to catching up for a while, actually.
Very much so. I'm trying to remember how long it's been. It's been probably a couple of years since we last had a proper chat.
Yeah, I would say so. And what a roller coaster since. Times are definitely different now than they were then.
They definitely are. That's right. So you've been doing an unbelievable job of building your brand. Maybe just give us sort of couple of minutes to explain who you are, what you do, and what your backstory's been, because it's unreal.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been a big growth over the past few years for Causeway Living, which is the health coaching company that it's set up. But I kind of look at it a little bit further back to probably the last 6 years since I hit a personal health rock bottom point. I was a good 7 stone heavier, 100 pounds heavier, and suffering from rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune health condition, and which is still quite difficult to articulate and actually say on podcasts and live videos, but not really wanting to wake up the next day. Like the depression side of that had reached to a point where I was feeling quite hopeless. And, it turns out rock bottom's a pretty good launch pad though, which is the positive. And
Yeah.
I made the decision, if I'd really got to the end of my journey, that I didn't want to be in my last hours or days looking back at something like, I could have tried this, or what if I'd done this? I might have got my health back. And that caused me to look into other people or look up other people online who were in a similar situation that I was then and had managed to get better. And I figured I'll follow what those guys did. And if it worked for them, it could work for me. And even if it didn't work for me, at least I would be able to rest knowing like I gave it my best, which is really all you can ask from anyone, I think.
Yeah. So who was it Joe Cross? Was it that was the influence?
That was definitely probably the biggest one, actually. There was two documentaries that I'd watched it was June 2014 was really like the turning point for me. And Joe Cross, for anyone watching who doesn't know, is mostly famous for a documentary called Fat, Sick and Nearly Dead. Which sounds really grim, but I always joke about this in the workshops. It's actually a really uplifting documentary. And, he is, like the title, very overweight. He was very unwell with an autoimmune disorder as well. He had some kind of psoriasis condition. And basically, long story short, went on a 2-month juice fast and lost a ton of weight and got off the pharmaceutical drugs, which was also a really big inspiration for me because the pharmaceutical drugs I was taking at the time when I was unwell were so strong that I was having to go up for a blood test every 2 weeks just for the medication that I was taking, not even for the arthritis condition, which just seemed crazy. And while I'm not poo-pooing all Western medicine and pharmaceutical drugs, I just knew it wasn't right for me. So he was a huge inspiration. I also watched another documentary called Super Juice Me at the same time, which was about a bunch of people that went on a 28-day juice fast. So
Was
about
that
half
Jason
of it
Vale?
then. It was, yeah. And he put together that documentary this is going to sound cynical, but it's not. It helped me massively. He put together that documentary, I guess, in a sense, to promote the 28-day program that he released. It sounds like a real business move, but it changed my life massively because I took that 28-day plan and put it back to back plus a few days to make it up to 60 and follow in Joe Cross's footsteps. And the results were amazing, but honestly, I'm not sure if I would have had the will to stick to it if not for around the same time as starting the juice fast, booking a trip to go to Peru, South America, to be treated by the plant medicines in the jungle there. And that was, so I booked that in June 2014, that rough point that I mentioned, and I wasn't going out there until January 2015. And because I had those 6 months to play with, I figured, okay, I'll do the 2-month juice fast and do whatever I can in the meantime before I go out there. And that also included doing whatever daily movement or activity I could each day, which literally, like on the first days of the juice fast, was like walk down the street for 10 minutes and turn around and come back and maybe be out for a walk for 20 minutes max. Like, to put it into context, even going up and down the short flight of stairs to the apartment that I'm in was, painful on my knees, or opening a door handle would have been painful from my wrist and the joints in my hand. So
Jeez.
it was that bad. And ultimately, though, it's weird saying it now, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, because if not for that, ultimately we wouldn't be having this conversation now, and I wouldn't have gone on to create Causeway Living and help thousands of people really improve their own circumstances. Which I think is a good message in this moment for anyone who's having like a real crisis in the middle of like lockdown and illness and all the rest of it. Like, sometimes what seems like the worst thing that could ever possibly happen to you in the moment, in hindsight, can sometimes just be the best thing that ever happened to you.
Yeah, precisely. Absolutely. These 13, it sounds glib to say it, but these 13-minute interviews don't last terribly long. So we'll kind of rip through the next few questions. You've done the whole Wim Hof experience as well. I mean, there's so much in your journey that we can kind of pick on, but I suppose translating it to the next main question that I have is, how have you been managing yourself in this sort of lockdown period, and what are some of the maybe routines or habits that you had ingrained over the past few years that have really helped?
Well, one that you mentioned absolutely is the Wim Hof method, but that's really for me like a part of a bigger lifestyle that involves moving regularly, getting a decent night's sleep, and some simple practical things you can do based around that, staying hydrated, getting outdoors, and ultimately moving forward with a sense of purpose. Because if you have a strong enough why, then you will be able to do all of those little individual hows, like a breathing practice or a cold shower or whatever else. And if the world was ever going to turn upside down, actually now is probably the best time ever for me personally, which is weird to say, because about 6 months ago, I had a bit of an epiphany where I realized that things weren't going exactly how I wanted to with Causeway Living, and I'd really invested into some things that maybe weren't working out as well from a business point of view as I would have liked. And the kind of revelation that I'd had was to just live as authentically as possible to all the values that I know, and make that my highest priority, and not Causeway Living as a business my highest priority. I began journaling as a process of doing that. And because it's a short interview, I'll fast forward to basically say that journaling process evolved into a 6-week program that takes like 6 habits that that I live by all the time, and basically do that out over 6 weeks into a 6-week journal. Actually, probably should have had one of those handy that I could have showed you on camera, but think of that next time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's absolutely amazing. Awesome.
So Wim Hof method, sleep's a big one. For anyone who doesn't know, the Wim Hof method is a focused, active breathing practice, and using cold water immersion to, in a nutshell, basically train your nervous system. The cold's probably the easiest and quickest to explain. The breathing does the same thing as this, but in a different way. But once you go into the cold, essentially it's an acute stress on your body, which probably most people can imagine, walking into a cold shower or an ice bath.
I've done the breathing and the cold exposure 3 times. So yeah, I know exactly what it's like. It's super intense. It's super intense.
And
I might have
using
to. We might have to fast track into the next question just now. So I'll pair this up.
Sure.
In what way do you think the world might change as a result of what's happening just now? And in what way would you like to see it change?
I think people are going to reorient their focus onto the simple and, I would argue, more important things. So health, spending time outdoors, really appreciating time with like-minded others. Essentially all the values that I've been really implementing over the last 6 months, and people realizing maybe that some of the things that they thought were important before the lockdown really weren't such a big deal. And I'm hoping, it builds a lot of resilience in people, What I was just going to touch on the end of the Wim Hof method was it's a tool for down regulating from stress. You go into the stress of the cold and you learn to down regulate from stress under the cold, and that helps whenever a real life stress comes along. Your nervous system knows how to down regulate from stress. So in some sense, if people live through this experience and come through the other side, they're going to be resilient in the same way a short, smaller practice like a cold shower can teach someone the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What advice or insights would you give to anyone that was having a really difficult time just now?
Probably the biggest piece of advice is if you want to start incorporating small positive habits for yourself, it can seem like a overwhelm, or the first thing that almost everyone tells me whenever they have any resistance is, oh, I'd love to, but I don't have the time. People invest a massive amount of time in consuming the 24-hour news feed, or, well, actually, some people will, on one end of the spectrum, spend loads of time watching the news. Some people on the other end of the spectrum will spend loads of time watching conspiracy theory documentaries, and some people are in between. I would encourage those people to question how much of that content they're consuming is actually moving them towards what they want in life. And if you decide if it's not actually helping you that much in the present, reel that right back in and use the extra time to go for a walk or phone your parents or grandparents or do a bit of exercise. Journal, exactly. On 6weekshift.com. Perfect plug, Elliot. That was great.
No, not at all. It's actually the last question I have is just where can people find you, Scott?
Yeah, so that new online course is on 6weekshift.com, all spelled out in letters. But the Causeway Living website is causewayliving.com, and all of the social media handles are just at Causeway Living. It's really simple.
Causeway Living.
Yeah, so I look forward to catching some new people on the other side of this interview. And
absolutely.
Yeah, really appreciate the time. It was great to catch up, albeit briefly.
Yeah, I know, right? We'll have to do it again and do it properly, but it's been great catching up and chatting with you, and I wish you all the best, and please take care and stay safe.
Likewise. Cheers, Elliot.
Thank you. Cheers, Scott.